Hi everyone, today I'm building a low profile home theater PC case with a full size GPU and with enough hard drive space to use it as a home file server or NAS. I also wanted the case to have a full function front I/O panel and proper GPU slot at the back, not just a hole cut out of the wood. I'm adding a blue epoxy strip across the front where the fans will be. So I start the cut with a coping saw and then I use a dovetail pool saw. I never made a dovetail in my life, so I don't know how useful these are for making dovetails, but they're awesome for so many other things. It wasn't very expensive and it's very sharp and flexible. So I went a bit overboard with silicone. I should probably use caulk next time as well. Apparently it's a bit cheaper than silicone. I did forget to add tape or mold release to the bottom of the mold. Make double sure the mold is level. The epoxy might look a bit viscous, but it will take a few hours to set, and in that time it will run all over the place. I added way too much pigment. I was just winging it since I didn't have any instructions, but apparently the pigment powder should be 2 to 7% by weight according to the internet. Every now and then you should pop the bubbles that formed. I tried using an electric heat gun, but it would disturb the epoxy and make ripples, so now I'm using this butane blowtorch. It's a bit small, but for a small pour like this, it will do. As I mentioned, I forgot to add tape to the mold and it took me forever to remove it. Since I'm lazy, I just chuck it through the thicknesser to remove the dry epoxy. Not sure if it's the right thing to do, but the epoxy is not that hard and this is fully cured, so I don't think it will gunk up any of the parts inside the thicknesser. And now I can rip it to the rough width. I'm standing on the wrong side, by the way. I should be standing on the other side of the blade so I'm not leaning over the blade. So here I am carefully marking the position of the fan holes just to screw it up 5 minutes later when I drilled the holes in the wrong position. So the one hole is 20mm too close to the next one. Usually I would start over, but this is not for a customer, so I'm just plowing ahead. Now I can rip all the pieces to the same width without moving the table saw fence, and again standing on the wrong side. Screw up number 2, I started cutting a groove in the front panel of the case, but it should only be on the side panels. So I went on a side quest to fill it up. Luckily this will be on the inside of the case and it won't be easily visible. And here I'm using that awesome little dovetail saw again. Plus you should not be cutting towards yourself like I'm doing here. I wanted a full function front I/O. Some people prefer to have only a power button, but sometimes I want to plug in USB devices to copy files or something, and you can't reach the back easily if it is under the TV, for instance. I did end up making it a bit too close to the epoxy strip, should have been a bit more to the right. And this will be the hole for the power button. I'm using 9mm plywood for the top, and this will be the hole for the GPU to pull in air. When I googled it, I saw people saying the GPU will be pulling air in towards itself, blowing the cool air over the die, but it turns out it is pushing air out. I think that is unique to this EVGA card. While searching I found out if you look at the fan fins, you can see the concave side, so it's pushing air out, while other GPUs I looked at you can see the convex side pulling air in. I printed this back panel for the PSU, motherboard I/O shield and horizontal mount for the GPU. I am gluing it together using UV epoxy just because I wanted to play around with UV epoxy. It worked, but not that well. Super glue would have been a better choice for this connection. I'm using an all-in-one primer and gap filler to get rid of the layer lines. This is a closed case, but I decided to spray paint the hard drive cages as well since I'm not a complete barbarian. I printed them with grey PLA and also sanded them and sprayed primer with gap filler. You can buy these fan mesh covers, but I'm making my own from a roll. I'm using a leather punch and I have no idea why I had that paper towel under it. I think it looks nice if you have a small round over for the fan holes, and then it is just tons of sanding and sanding and sanding. You can see a small screw up with the GPU fan hole, but it will be covered by mesh later on so it won't be visible. Up till now all the parts were rough cut to size. In this case the other part dimensions will be referenced off the 3D printed back panel, since that piece is a fixed size as it is now. I added some threaded inserts to the 3D printed back panel, but it was a disaster, so I won't be showing that. What I did learn is you don't need that much heat to embed them. Marking the motherboard holes are pretty straightforward, and then I added some threaded inserts. I added some super glue to the hole and smacked them in with a hammer and nail punch, and then I screwed in the motherboard standoffs. I glued in the back panel with epoxy and some wood screws at the bottom. I made a GPU support bracket with neoprene pad so the GPU won't be rubbing against a hard surface. So far the nail punch worked very well to drive in threaded inserts, and I didn't damage any threads yet, but pine is very soft, so your mileage may vary with harder woods. If there is a very small difference on the edge and the top, I prefer to use a plane instead of a trim router. It's less of a mess and less chance to screw things up. For the finish I'm using paste wax. It's some no-name brand one I got off eBay, but it had a strong smell that hung around for 24 hours after applying it. I've since switched to using beeswax. So I prefer wax since it doesn't form a layer over the wood. When it is properly soaked up you can barely feel it on the surface, and it makes the pine surface look like butter, although it doesn't quite come through on the video that well. Aligning the mesh and the threaded inserts with the fan holes and the screws can be a bit of a mission, but I do have some ideas to make it easier next time. I made a holder for the GPU riser out of wood instead of printing it, since it will be inside and not visible, plus it will be a bit stronger than PLA I think. I didn't plan for this, but it dawned upon me that this case could be used vertically. So I added this bracket around the PSU since I didn't know if the PLA would be strong enough and the screws won't tear out after a while. One of the reasons this case is so big is because I wanted enough space to replace hard drives without having to remove the cages or other components. You still need very small screwdriver to reach the screws between the fans and the 3.5-inch bay, but it is perfectly doable. I did learn that PLA works fine for these parts, but you have to take a bit more care. In the case of the hard drive base, I cracked some of the bottom supports by screwing it in too far. The PLA print doesn't compress very well, it cracks easily. At some point I'll try PETG. I ended up gluing the GPU fan mesh into the mesh cover. Next time I'll make the cover a bit wider so the mesh can't move around without using glue. I'm not a big RGB fan, hence the name of the channel, but I added a RGB strip underneath the fans to see how it would look. Now this is a new channel and I'm still working out the format of the videos. It feels to me like there are like 1,000 small steps to building a PC case, and for now I'm trying to explain them as I go along instead of playing music. But let me know in the comments what you think about the format and length, since I used fast forward quite a bit and I try to keep the video a reasonable length. Thank you for watching, see you next time.